Guys, so today I'm bringing guys a brand new sports cards video. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the biggest mistake that I see sports card investors making right now. Now, before we get into that, I did want to say this week's giveaway is a Nikola Jokic Prism PSA 9. If you guys would like to enter, all you have to do is subscribe, like this video, comment the word done down below, and you will be entered in to win a free card that's worth a couple $100. So those 3 simple steps that should take you less than a minute will get you entered. Once again, subscribe, like the video, comment the word done, and you are entered in to win the Nikola Jokic Prism rookie. But without further ado, we're going to hop right into the video. And so one of the biggest mistakes that I see investors making right now is after a player has an amazing season, when they lose in the playoffs, there tends to be a little bit of a dip. It's usually a very short-term dip. However, I see a lot of sellers panicking and selling for super low prices. As you guys know, the offseason, if you guys have been watching this channel for a little bit, you guys know that the offseason is where a lot of the price gains happen. If we look at Jordan Love's market, for example, we can see that his cards have more than doubled, this whole offseason. You can see, I believe, around middle to end of January was when they lost to the 49ers in the playoffs. Jordan Love had a great season. They beat the Cowboys. You saw a big jump in his prices. But as you guys can see, this is the point where, in January 7th, I believe that's around when they beat the Cowboys. You saw a little bit of a jump. A lot of people thought that that was the time to sell. They beat the Cowboys, all this hype is there, and then they lose to the 49ers, so you would assume his prices would come back down to earth. However, since they lost to the 49ers, his index was at around 1,100, and his index right now is over 2,100. He hasn't played a game since, January. However, his cards, overall, a lot of his cards have more than doubled since January. A lot of his key cards, the investable cards of his, have more than doubled since January. And so there's a lot of things in the sports card market that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, where on-court performance and prices of players are not always correlated. If you were to explain this to someone who's new to the sports card industry, it does not make sense that from January to June, his cards have more than doubled in price, even though he hasn't played a single game since. However, there's a lot of other factors. Leading into the next year is when you'll see prices really start to increase. You can see overall across the board, most of his cards, for example, this card right here, Prism Silver PSA 9, super simple card, not really the most investable card, but still, a decent card of his to track because it sells a lot. This card was around a $100 card in January. It's currently over 200, and that's just across the board. A lot of his higher end cards have appreciated even more just because, there's a lot more high-end buyers now that he's a lot more established. This card right here is National Treasures BGS 9. This was a $3,000 card in December. Even in January, when he was winning all those big games and the peak of the hype, quote-unquote hype, when he was actually playing and doing really well, and in the playoffs and exceeding expectations, it was still a $6K card. It's currently a $12,000 card. And so it's still doubled, since he had that big game and since he beat the Cowboys. And after he lost to the Niners, you could see every single month it continued to jump in price. And so I definitely believe that a lot of investors, and I see it happen all the time, for guys like Anthony Edwards, for example, guys like Jalen Brunson, who had breakout seasons, I think a lot of their price, a lot of their gains are yet to happen. I'd put it that way. I think they're kind of in the same boat where they had the breakout years like Jordan Love did in football. It's very comparable, I would say. Of course, there's different things between Anthony Edwards coming out as the #1 pick. His card started a little bit higher. Jalen Brunson, 2018 draft class. It's a lot of, different factors, but I think the baseline economics still stays the same. I think a lot of the price movement for guys like Jalen Brunson and Anthony Edwards are going to happen this offseason. I don't think they've of course had big jumps. If you look at Brunson's market, they still gone up a good bit, but I think his cards still have a long way to go. For him being the #1 option on a team that was pretty much going to make the Eastern Conference Finals if they were to stay healthy, and a player who played injured and was still dropping 40 points a game in the playoffs at times. I think a lot of hype is going to be on Brunson being in New York City, and his cards are just so low compared to a lot of other players who I think are in the same boat, and I think a lot of his prices are going to catch up a lot this offseason, in my opinion. Of course, we're not comparing him to Luka, but if you look at, for example, a Blue Prism color match, just to get a kind of idea of where they're at compared to Luka, you can see that this is around a $750 card, and you can just kind of get an idea for upside. Of course, you're not going to compare it to guys like Luka Doncic. He's kind of on a different trajectory. A lot more people are buying into his long-term market, but I would say, guys like Shea, other players in that caliber, Tyrese Maxey, of course, a lot of them are a little bit younger, but if you look at where their prices are at, I think there's a lot of movement for Brunson. Should he be 5% the price of Luka Doncic? Should he be, just a quarter of Shea? I think he showed very similar potential, and a lot of his cards haven't really, shown that increase yet. And so I think a lot of upside still to be had. A lot of people are saying, oh, you should have sold off in the peak, when he was in the playoffs before he lost to Indiana. I think most of the gains, as you guys can see, when you look at guys like Jordan Love, not only Jordan Love, but even last offseason, you saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He had a breakout year last year. When he lost in the playoffs, a lot of people I actually don't believe they made the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. But after the season, a lot of people were selling off. And I remember telling people, hold on to your Shea. This offseason is going to be the time where it really goes up. And this was around the end of the season last year. So around the end of the season last year, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, his cards had a massive sell-off. His index was at around 4,000. And if you look at throughout the offseason, it continued to increase. And leading into the year, boom, you saw massive spikes throughout the year. And you can see his index right now is sitting at over 8,000. So I just think overall there's a lot of upside still to be had. I think a lot of the people panic selling at the low points because they haven't had their jump yet. I think they're going to be regretting it later this offseason. Of course, everyone's strategy is different. If you are more of a flipper, I'm not really, showing you guys too much in this video. I think this is mainly for investors and more so people who are willing to kind of hold and wait out. But I think a lot of cards, of Jalen Brunson, if you look at his index, where it's at, I think it's primed for some massive growth. And I think overall, his cards are going to see a big bump throughout the offseason leading into next year. I think his cards are going to get what I call the price rediscovery phase, is when, a player has a breakout year, and now the market this offseason is going to have a chance to, overall rediscover where Brunson should be compared to all these other young stars. If you even look at a lot of Maxey's cards, they're still sitting higher. I don't know, where the market is going to decide they should be compared to Brunson, but if you look at Maxey, he's still a second option on a team that I think is worse than the Knicks, in my personal opinion. And the hype, of course, is a lot different. You've got the New York City hype leading a team like the Knicks, kind of brings you a different level of popularity, I think, and just like more eyes on you. And of course, having those playoff runs is massive to have under your belt. A solid playoff run that could have ended a lot farther, of course, barring injuries. But he's definitely one of my favorite investments right now. I'm like, if you look at where his prices are compared to most other young stars, I think his cards are primed to see a big increase in price. And so I definitely think a lot of people have to kind of get out of the habit of thinking between, this player had a great year and, I would say people have to get out of the fact of correlating performance to price increase. A lot of the gains that you see happen in the sports card market happen during the times where the player isn't even playing, during the off season. All of that happens, and I think a lot of cards get into the hands of people holding for next year, and then the supply really dries up throughout the off season. When the supply dries up, less and less are selling. Like you can see during the playoffs for a Prism Silver, for example, a Brunson, you would see multiple sell a day. You would see 3, 4, 5 of these cards sell a day. And more recently, you're barely even seeing one sell a day. There's some days where not even one is selling. So you can already see supply starting to dry up a lot, in Brunson's market, for example. And I think throughout the offseason, you're going to see less and less people wanting to sell Brunson because the people who are buying right now are buying to hold. If you look during the playoffs, there's some days where literally like 10 plus of these Prism Silvers were selling. There was so much supply hitting the market. And right now, as you can see, a lot of that supply is drying up. And what happens when supply dries up is that even if demand stays the same throughout the offseason, his prices should rise, and they're at more affordable prices now. So I think there are a lot of great buying opportunities right after a season ends, and a lot of the people who are panic selling, especially selling for like 70, 80% comp just to get out of it, I think a lot of those people are going to regret, panic selling a lot of these cards. So I hope you guys took something from this video. If you enjoyed it, drop a like. We are on our way to 50,000 subscribers, so I'd appreciate it if you guys could subscribe. And also, for the giveaway, you have to subscribe, like the video, comment the word done. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm out. Peace.